Hey guys, welcome back to the Ground Up Show. My name is Matt Diavella and I'm your host. Today on the show, I've got Matt Nadu. He is a good friend. He is a filmmaker, actor, and producer. He's incredibly talented and he's got a lot of great stories to tell. I think you're gonna really like this episode. But first, before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like this podcast and you liked Minimalism, a documentary about the important things, I've got something for you. I recently conducted interviews with the producers of Minimalism to give a detailed look at how we made the film. We cover all the twists, turns, and big breakthroughs, and there's an incredible amount of wisdom packed into these interviews. And I think they're going to help anybody who's really starting out on something new, somebody who wants to tackle a big project, or maybe somebody who just wants to get a better understanding of how this film came about and how we were able to put it all together. So those interviews are yours for free if you leave a review for the Ground Up Show on iTunes. Reviews help to get the word out for the show and help us to continue to do what we do here. So to get an immediate access to the interviews, take a screenshot of your review and send it to hello@mattdiavella.com. And now, without further ado, this is episode 24 with Matt Nadu. All right, Matt Nadu.
How you doing, sir?
What's going on, man?
Nah, I'm good. I love that intro. It makes me feel like I'm like walking down the streets of Brooklyn or something.
That's it. Just the theme music to your life.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Welcome to LA.
I know. I'm excited to be here.
Dang, man.
It's only been a couple weeks. I feel like I'm starting to settle in.
Yeah.
You've been here for a few months now.
Nah,
to
I
a
got
year.
here like a little over a year ago.
A year, and you're liking
I'm
it?
like an old timer now. I remember when people were like, "Oh man, like 2 weeks. Look at you."
Yeah. I feel like way more people move from the East Coast to the West Coast than vice versa.
Yeah, I don't really know anyone from California that moved to the
East I need to move to New York and just
why would you?
Get
Besides
out.
Wawa, I mean, realistically,
Wawa's great. Wawa's a religion.
It is
in the Philadelphia region.
I got to be honest. It like every Sunday morning, it's packed. It's like before people go to church, they go to Wawa.
Oh wow!
And then they go to church.
So what's the whole Wawa experience for people who have no idea what Wawa is or have never been to a Wawa? Why is it so amazing?
All right, so I didn't even know where the term Wawa came from, but I've been reading a lot of John Muir lately. Mm-hmm. If you don't know who John Muir is, look him up. He pretty much created the national park system, but he's a Cali guy, and he's talking about being in Alaska and finding these glaciers, and he keeps saying the word Wawa. Now, I don't know if it's like a term for a Native American tribe up there or whatever it is, but Wawa is basically like the mecca of gas and food and lottery tickets in Philadelphia. I don't know how they do it. It's the cheapest gas. They have free ATMs, and they have the best damn sandwiches.
Dope sandwiches.
Oh my God.
That's the thing.
But it's like seasonal.
Yeah. That's like the future of sandwich making is that you have the screen that you can walk up to and then you can just create it there. There's no stress to it. You can take your time.
Nothing. And you can browse around and, fill up a slushie halfway full, drink that a little bit while you're waiting. You know what I mean? Break off a pizza soft pretzel while you're standing in line.
There's an art to it for sure.
Oh, no, definitely.
Tell everybody a little bit about what you currently do. As a producer, actor, you're one that wears many hats. So kind of run us through where you spend most of your time right now.
Yeah, so I'm one of those guys, I kind of get my hands in everything. And I guess we both went to Temple University.
Right.
I guess that was in there being in the media. They're like, oh man, like newspapers aren't going to be the thing anymore and TV and you got to learn. So I get my hands a lot of stuff. I've been working on a lot of films. I have a film that's premiering on BET September 16th. It's called Secrets that I acted in. So that's coming out pretty soon and that's kind of cool. But I've been doing a lot of content creating lately. Mm-hmm. My girlfriend Hope, she's here. She works at NPR, and she's like incredible at we just travel. We travel everywhere, and we put together these like 60-second like travel videos on kind of like millennials that are creatives and freelancers that we do. That we have this opportunity to create beautiful content, but it doesn't always have to be stuff that we don't want to create. Like we have our clients, and we're like, you're doing industrials or whatever.
Yeah.
But we can also get out and make our own stuff. And the beauty with social media now is that you can become an influencer. Like you're an influencer, man. Like you're pushing this
small
whole,
time.
Nah, man, with minimalism and pushing all this stuff, like people look up to you and they're like, we're the forefront of this new reality in this like new world. And it's like, how do you create for that? So I've been learning. I was doing feature film production for a while, and it was just so overwhelming and it was so stressful. And there was a couple of projects I literally put 2 years into it, and all my connects and all my resources, and they just kind of fizzled out, or you know what I mean? It just takes one person to kind of jump ship and everything kind of rocks. So kind of like you, just creating your own content, and it doesn't have to be, it could be simple. Just go out, get a camera and just shoot.
That's the difference, though, is that now, like you're saying with social media, everybody has access to these platforms. Everybody has access to YouTube and Twitter and whatnot. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the skills that are going to prop you up and that are going to get the message out there. You're somebody who has developed these skills over the years. You can shoot really beautiful video. So you going out there and telling a story, whether you're in Vietnam or you're up the coast in California, those stories, I feel like you can tell the story in a much richer way, and you can because it's a lot of these mediums are so visual, but also there's the storytelling element. So just because somebody has an iPhone doesn't mean, and they have access to Instagram, doesn't mean they're going to make something that's worth watching.
Not necessarily, but the thing is, you can make something, and that's the first step.
That's the thing, yeah.
I mean, because at one point, like, I'm an idiot in a lot of things. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I love to try to learn and see, what are you doing? What's my stuff look like compared to yours? And what are you doing that I like? And kind of pull a little bit from that. Yeah. And I think it's great to, have your own originality and to create your own thing. But everything that we do, we're stealing from somebody else, like our technique or whatever we're doing.
Especially in the beginning, when you're first starting to learn a medium. I remember just watching my friends and people who I had been friends of friends with on Facebook and MySpace, and just seeing the work that they were putting out there.
Oh, you were a MySpace guy.
Yeah, a little bit. Once I went to college, that's when Facebook started to take over. But I was definitely on there and definitely had filmmaker friends who were putting out videos. And whether it was just like a video of the person's backyard, and like they just colored it in a certain way, or they made a short film, a sketch comedy video, I would just get so inspired by that and I would just copy it. Yeah. I'm just going to take that and do that same exact thing and then put it out there. At that time, I feel like you can't do that once you get too far into it, but that's how you learn.
Yeah. Well, even the phenomenon of Instagram, I remember thinking like, what is this? I'm like, oh my gosh, you could put these filters and all this stuff, and it made everybody with an iPhone think that they were a professional photographer.
Yeah. When did you first start getting into filmmaking and creative arts?
Oh, man. So I went to Temple University, and I got my first job. I was actually one of the main people at Temple Association of Black Journalists. Now, if this is a video, I'm not black, but they had the most interactive club, and they were just doing so much thing. They had so many amazing alumni. I got in with that, and I set up our end of the year kind of get together. And Chris Blackman, who at the time was the news director of NBC in Philadelphia, was like, "Oh, you're Matt Nadu," and I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You got a job after college?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You got one at NBC." So I started out being a PA there, but it was kind of like what we're doing now. I was a production assistant, and all I wanted to do was sports. So I would get in at my shift was 4 to 11 a.m. On the morning desk, but I would get in super early and I'd stay super late. I basically lived there, and I would just start writing columns and just start writing articles for them. And I realized social media was just coming out, so I could do all this stuff, and no one else there wanted to learn it. Everybody else was in their 30s and 40s, this social media stuff's gonna pass. So I was very blessed to be on the forefront of that. So I started creating there, and I didn't really want to work for the man, because you work for news, there's an agenda, and you know what they're pushing. So I did an interview on M. Night Shyamalan was doing The Last Airbender. I don't recommend seeing that movie, but he was doing it, and I was interviewing someone about it, and they're like, "Oh, you should go out for the casting." And I'm like, "Well, what is that?" They're like, "Oh, we're meeting up at wherever in Philly." So it was up at the Tasty Cake Warehouse, up in the Northeast. I went in there, and actually, this is kind of a funny story. So I get in there, and it was for martial artists. So I go in, and I went on YouTube, and I'm trying to learn jiu-jitsu moves the day before. You
had never done any karate before this.
I did when I was a fat kid, and I was really sweaty, and I couldn't even reach down and touch my kneecap. So my karate career was short-lived at 11 years old. But so I go there, and it's this huge warehouse, and everybody there's like a black belt. These guys are doing backflips and crazy stuff, and I'm wearing like Nike running shorts and like a shirt that like I made a cut off because I like ripped it with my teeth earlier that morning.
Yeah.
So I get in there and I'm sitting, and I'm like, maybe acting isn't for me. Maybe I should just stick to sports. And there's a kid next to me, and he's leaned over, and he puts this headband on, like his Karate Kid headband, pulls it, and he sits up, and the kid has Down syndrome, and he is like so amped up for this audition. And I look at him. And I just got off the phone with my mom saying, yeah, I'm going to bail. And I'm like, look how amped up this kid is. Like, zero cares in the world. I'm like, if this kid goes in and I don't have the balls to go in, like, I got to reevaluate everything I'm doing. So I went in and I got, like, background stuff. But I kept trying to go in front of the camera. So I was like a DP's worst nightmare. Mm-hmm. So as, like, the principals were doing their thing, I kept trying to slide in. So the one day, they're like, you're in too many shots. What's your name? We're going to bump you up. So I got like this bump and ended up joining the union and made a decent amount of money off it. So that's kind of how my acting career started by default.
And what made you decide to go to that audition? What attracted you to it?
Well, I don't really know. I guess it was the allure of what we do, you know, being in film, and there's this big movie coming in, and M. Night Shyamalan's from Philly, and he's done all this stuff and these fantastic movies. And I just kind of wanted to be a part of it. And then I realized it was more than just, hanging out at Crafty all day, eating as much food as I possibly could because it was free.
Was it hard work to be, I mean, you were an extra bumped up to...
It was like an extra. It was, we had to learn a lot of like karate routines and do all this stuff. But honestly, I just went, we would go, I still was working at NBC, so our call time was like 6 a.m. every day. But I worked at NBC till 11 a.m. So I would come in like 5 hours late. The PA would just still mark me on time. But that got me into other stuff, and then I started auditioning. I learned a lot of stuff from a lot of the actors that were actually principals there. So then I got in good with Diane Heary, who runs casting out of Philadelphia. And, and then eventually, you start auditioning for bigger and better things and taking it seriously and seeing this is something that I actually want to do.
That you have, there's the potential there. You could somehow work your way up. Because I feel like that's all you need is just a little bit of a taste.
Yeah.
To realize that there's potential here.
Yeah. And a lot of it's connections. Like I was very blessed to meet people that were like, hey, I'll set you up with my agent or recommend me to talk to different people. And I got very blessed to get in because a lot of this industry, even recommendations on stuff, it's just like who you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have friends that are fantastic, but their workload's too big. And they know that you do quality work, so like, hey, could you do this for me?
Yeah, what was that balance there? Because there's an aspect of knowing the right people, but if you're not good, then it doesn't matter who you know.
Yeah, well, that comes out too.
Yeah.
You can only bullshit so much.
Sure. So where do you go after that? You finish up the M. Night Shyamalan.
So I did that, and then I auditioned for random stuff. I've had a lot of success in commercial, like print and commercials and stuff. So that's been fun to me a lot. But I moved up to New York to try to get into the big stuff. And I was doing stunts and stand-in for this show. This is like a couple years later. Stunts and stand-in for a show called Power, which is on Encore right now. It's like 50 Cent show. So I got on that, and I met so many people. And it was funny because I'm doing like stand-in work, but I'm auditioning for like the same type of shows. But like in between stand-in, we'd have lunch, and we were shooting at the Navy Yard up in Brooklyn, and I'd quick jump on the train and head into Manhattan and go to an audition real quick and then jet back.
Wow.
So it was cool because like all day, like I would chill with 50 Cent, and the guy's like one of the most smartest guys you can ever imagine. And I'd find myself at night like hanging out with them or doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like I took this stupid stand-in job. But instead of just going there and just running through the motions, I learned. And like as a stand-in, you have the DP there, you have the director, you have everybody there, and they're all talking about the scenes. And I could see how everything kind of works. And that's kind of how I started shifting into producing. But
right, and for people who don't know what a stand-in is, it's you're there on set. You look like or have the same skin tone of somebody who's going to be in your position. And
you
so
basically have to have a face. That's your big qualification.
That's it. So, but like you said, this is a job that most people would just kind of go in, be like, oh, this is cool, take the money and leave. But to be able to, you're in a position that most people aren't. So you can kind of leverage that to make connections and to somehow meet a person or two that might be able to help you.
And I got a lot of jobs off that. And believe it or not, a lot of the producers are out in LA now. I hang out with them all the time. But Yeah, I got very blessed. I was actually living in my car in Dumbo, down under the Manhattan Bridge, if you're aware of Dumbo.
You were living under a bridge.
Yeah,
in your car.
I was living in a car down by the river.
That's good.
No, I found a parking spot, and I would go Sunday mornings. We'd have to be on set at like 6 a.m. I would leave Philly because I was living in Philly, and I would get there around 4 a.m. I'd park my car under the bridge, but I was good all week. You could park there all week. So I would park there before anybody else would get there, and it was like Wi-Fi there. There was a gym there. So I'd be on set for like 16 hours, walk to my car, beautiful, like the bridge was there, everything was great, free Wi-Fi, hit the gym. It was a poor man's dream.
Right. So then that's where you can shower and you can
I could do all that right
brush
there.
your teeth right at the gym.
Yeah. And I was staying at the studios a lot. I had a couple PAs that would just let me use the room. So I kind of had like a apartment there.
You weren't always sleeping in your car.
No, I slept there a lot.
That's
and
a little scary,
under snowstorms.
man.
And
really?
it was like from September to March.
Wait, snowstorm, you kept the car on when you were sleeping?
No, I had a lot of
blankets?
A lot of blankets and a lot of hoodies.
Holy shit, man.
It sounds crazy, but rent's so expensive in New York, and I was paying for a place in Philly at the time.
Yeah. And
I had a bad experience in New York living, so I just stuck with the car.
You stuck with the car. I mean, actually, I just found out about this. There's a story about this guy that was literally sleeping under the bridge. He created a loft that was built into the bridge.
Genius.
And he lived there for like a year or two.
Is that on Airbnb? Because I feel like you could rent, you could rent that out.
It's probably still $1,000 a month,
Yeah.
even if it's living under the bridge. But that's amazing. And that's like, man, I feel like sometimes you just got to do what you got to do if you want to get the job and you want to keep working. Like there's no other way to do it.
But it all comes back to like sacrifice and willingness to learn, because I would just soak up everything I could on the actor side of things, and it's a weird balance because I work in front and behind the camera. So I booked a couple films, and I worked on 50 Cent music video because of this, and just I think no matter what you do, you just have to be willing to put yourself out there. Because I've definitely let my ego step in and be like, oh no, I'm too good for this, or I've done this, so I can't do this. And then that's where I have a reality check that like, man, just step back and just learn.
Did the acting on camera help you when you started to move more behind the camera?
Yeah, I did a feature called The Church, and I think it's coming out next year. We had like Bill Moseley, Ashley C. Williams, she was on Human Centipede, Clint Howard, Ron Howard's brother. He's a hilarious guy. But we had all these great actors on there, and I was producing and one of the leads on there. So that was a weird balance, working with all these like horror icons and being there trying to learn from them as an actor, but then also having to step back as a producer and, you know, kind of change hats and be like, hey, like this isn't working, or we need to do this. Like the director was a first-time director, and just he knew his vision, but he couldn't really relay it to his cast. So he was trying to work like 16, 17-hour days and didn't understand why people needed to eat 3 times a day, or why is pizza not sufficient every damn meal?
Yeah.
You know, so that was that balance where I had to go back and forth and try to do that. And I had to like just step in and be like, hey, like if I'm getting pissed off, I know damn well these guys are getting pissed off. So you have to kind of create a balance. And I tell a lot of my buddies that are directors, go to an acting class. Just see how actors think and how they do things. And, you know, a lot of times it seems like acting, the guy just comes and he goes on set and then he leaves and it's an easy job, especially when you're behind the camera in production, because, you know, it's easy for an actor to leave and you guys are working on it for another year and a half. But there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of pressure in trying to carry that. And
there's so much pressure in it.
Yeah, you have to learn, I think, sometimes I think the most amazing thing is just letting that camera roll. You know what I mean? And like picking up those moments where like an actor, you know, has to find his rhythm and you know, find his character, find himself.
I find that with documentary work, and that's advice I would give to anybody who's starting to get into doc stuff and doing any kind of interview, is just start recording early on. Before the person sits down in the chair, hit record, because it's not going to take up any extra digital media. I mean, even if you're shooting on a red, you can spare a couple minutes here and there. And but because you get these moments when that person sits down in the chair and then they start to have this natural conversation with the interviewer, and you can get something there that is what everybody is looking for out of a documentary, which is like realness and authenticity. And even those words are thrown around so flippantly now. it's once somebody knows that they're being interviewed, there's kind of for some people, there's a switch.
Absolutely.
They click and then they feel like everything they need to say needs to be perfect, needs to be phrased in the right way. But it's like, there's a place for that when you're doing the industrial videos, the corporate videos, and all you want is a 30-second soundbite. But there is an element to it when you're doing doc stuff and you really want to know who the person is. You want them to feel comfortable and you want to be able to get those moments across.
But I think that plays on the director a lot to create this world that I can be comfortable. Because if you have a director and if you're not clicking with them and the director doesn't know how to finesse his actors or whoever's on camera, it's not going to be authentic.
Right. When did you decide to stop living under a bridge and then upgrade? I mean, you had an apartment, so it's not totally fair to say that you were strictly living under a bridge.
No, I mean, it was Monday through Saturday morning at 3 a.m.
It was fair to say that you were living under a bridge for quite a while.
I was definitely hardcore living under a bridge. Like, hey, come on over. We'll sit in my car and
talk about minimalism. So you're living under a bridge, and then that project ends, and then you go back to Philly?
Yeah, I went back to Philly. I would get so frustrated because I'd be on set, and I would see actors that they would bring in for the show that I'm like, damn it, that should be me. Mm-hmm. Why am I not getting this role? And then I realized sometimes you have to step back. Like the main creator only saw me as that stand-in, you know? And a lot of times, I don't know. It's kind of weird. You got to know when to walk away from something. Like, it was good money and stuff, but I realized as long as I'm being there, all those people, we can have a great relationship and go get beers, but they're just going to keep seeing me as that.
It's the same mentality of people who go to work in a professional career. Mm-hmm. They start out in the mailroom or as an intern or a PA, and then everybody, your boss and your coworkers included, think that you see you at that level.
Yeah.
And the best way to navigate and rise up and to get more challenging and creative work is to leave that company, go to another company.
Yeah. I have a buddy right now. It's not what the job was, but it's basically like the assistant for the CEO. Mm-hmm. But he has so many good ideas and the kid's so smart, but everybody in the company, even though he knows, like, he's been promised a good job after this first initial year of being an assistant, they're all like, just leave, because that CEO doesn't take you seriously. And I guess that there's a guy that he works with, like, you got to know when to walk away and to just take everything that you've learned from that and then move on, like you said, to another company where you're valued and people don't see you in that light. Mm-hmm. And that's good and bad, because a lot of times we get comfortable. Yeah. And we're like, oh man, well, I've been here for a year and I don't want to. Instead of thinking you wasted that time, why don't you take that? Man, that was an opportunity and that was a year for me to grow. Now I'm really going to explode somewhere else. Comfort
is one of the scariest things, I think.
It's our worst enemy.
Because, and you can relate it to so many different aspects of your life, whether it's exercise and eating healthy. Mm-hmm. We get so comfortable in the patterns and the routines that we get into, especially when it comes to creative work and professional freelance work. If you're not challenging yourself, if you're not pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, it's said very often, but I feel like it bears repeating as much as possible, that you need to do shit that you're uncomfortable doing.
And it's ironic because being comfortable, you think, oh, this works for me. But that's when you get burned out. Mm-hmm. When you just keep doing the same thing over and over. Like, even workout, like we both work out and you're looking good.
Thanks, man.
You got that Cali box.
Just got back into it, yeah.
But it's like you keep doing the same workout. At some point, your muscles are gonna, or your body's gonna be like, yeah, we know this. You got to switch things up. And
when did you start getting into fitness and exercising? You said you grew up as a fat kid.
Yeah, I was a fat kid. Okay, so 7th grade, I had this big crush on this girl, Tony Ann. Who I eventually ended up dating.
Nice. You did it.
I did it. It's all downhill since 9th grade. No, but we were in 7th grade and I was walking. She was walking in front of me and it was like, the doors when you're in school, it's like a wood door, but then there's like the glass that goes around like your door or whatever, the classroom door. So she's walking and I'm looking at her chest through the reflection. Like, as she's walking towards the door, I could see this good reflection. The light was perfect. And I'm like, bingo, right? She makes a left turn, and now I see my own reflection, and I realize, damn, my chest is bigger than hers.
Oh, shit.
Like,
that's like
legit.
A real moment.
I sat down at my desk, and I looked around. I was, like, so conscious of myself, and I'm like, shit. Like, man, I'm always just going to be that, like, oh, Matt's just a friend guy. Like, everybody else is French kissing. I don't even know what this shit is. So, yeah, it was, like, summer going into like, 8th or 9th grade. My parents have this... big garage, and upstairs it's like 100 degrees year round. And I would throw on sweatshirts and hoodies and just sit on this exercise bike and just go to town. And that whole summer, all I ate was tuna in a can, eggs, bananas, and string cheese. And my kind of guilty pleasure was Chex Mix. But I didn't eat the pretzels. I just ate everything else.
I feel like pretzels would be like the only thing that's the healthiest thing out of
Maybe,
Chex Mix.
but that was my guilt day. But ever since then, I don't know. I kind of look at it like I've been getting into a lot of like meditation and yoga, and not because I moved out to California, but just getting your mind. I'm pretty religious / spiritual guy, so I think you have to kind of have everything in line, because if you don't have balance in your life in everything that you do, you're not going to be your best person. Like I used to sports write too, so I used to sports write for the Flyers, and I would be up in the booth and I would see these guys, and there's all this candy and all this food, and they would just eat this constantly, and I'm like, man, these guys are like 40 and can barely walk up these steps. They're like 50, 60 pounds overweight, and I'm like, man, their only happy time was sitting in that booth and writing. The rest of their life was falling apart. And then I realized you kind of have to have a balance on everything. Because if you're healthy, you feel good, then it's like you can go out and your work reflects that. Every aspect of your life kind of reflects that. So I think it's not so much working out. Like for me, it's a healthy balance of diet. Like if I can't pronounce something in food, I don't eat it.
Mm-hmm. Once you change one aspect of your life, start meditating, start exercising, it tends to tip the scale in a lot of other areas of your life. Whenever I start going to the gym, I subsequently start eating better, just because I feel better after a workout. I want to, have my protein shake or have my smoothie, and then it starts to shift different aspects of my life. And then once I start eating better, I'm like, I should start meditating a little bit and bring that into my life. So sometimes all it takes is just to make one change in your life, and then the rest will follow along. Yeah,
since I moved out to California a little over a year ago, my life has just been one big experiment. And I think with a lot of that, I've been trying to focus on gratitude a lot. So, like being here, this is so awesome. Like I've done podcasts, like recorded them, but never been on one. And this is cool. Like we do this thing every morning where we're like, oh, what are you praying about? What are you grateful for? What are you like worried about? Whatever. And this was like my thing for today. Like this is what I'm most excited about. Like getting on this podcast, being creative, sitting with a creative person that gets how all this is. And I think in our industry, it's temporary fulfilling, right? Like you did minimalism, or we did design disruptors together, and it's like right when it's finished at that moment, you're like, oh man, but then it's like, what's next? And as a freelancer and as a creative, we're caught in this cycle of what's next, and we don't step back and appreciate things. And I think a big adjustment for me is a couple months ago, I just did this campaign for Honda. And the whole time I'm on set, I'm like, oh man, like, am I going to get this audition next week? And like, how's this going to work? Whatever. And then as we're filming, I like look, and there was this tour bus of like, I guess they were like Chinese tourists, and they're all taking pictures as we're shooting like downtown. Like we're like, I'm, not to be confused with Ryan Reynolds, but like I'm Ryan Reynolds. And I sat back and I'm like, wow, like, I remember when I was that guy standing there thinking, man, I wish that was me living in LA and doing commercials and doing this stuff. And I'm like, now I'm here and I don't appreciate it. Like, how much of an asshole am I? And like, I sat back and I'm like, man, there's a guy literally making ribs exactly how I want them on set. And I'm totally taking that for granted. So I've been trying to live life just taking everything in stride and just appreciating everything. And quality of life has totally changed. Like I'm not worried, I'm not stressed about things, and I've been booking so much more. It was like the minute that I was like, well, who gives a shit? Like I don't give a fuck anymore about like acting and killing myself and stressing. That's when everything kind of opened up.
Isn't it funny how that works?
Absolutely.
It's so crazy. Bizarre. And we were just talking about this before the podcast started, is like, I think you were talking about emails that you sent to directors or producers that you really liked, and then you look back and you're like, cringe. You're like, shit, I was so eager, and I was just clearly trying to get something out of that.
It was me.
Yeah, that's it.
Not how can I learn?
That's really difficult to do as somebody that's very young, and a lot of people are going to make those mistakes naturally. I've sent so many emails to people where that I've since met. Like there's been people that really inspired me, and in doing minimalism, I was able to go out and interview with all these people whose blogs I read and articles who'd really helped me, books who'd helped me to change my perspective on life and where my priorities were. And then I look back and I see that I had emailed them, a couple years before the doc started. And I'm like cringing. I'm like, like I clearly was trying to get something from them or was like, hey, like I would love to make a video with you. And, innocent, but still at the same time, it's like you think about these people that get so many emails and it's, I think sometimes we don't realize how selfish we can be when we're that young. Yeah, but like you said, absolutely. that kind of want, when you're like, me, all I want is something out of this interaction, you're never going to get what you want.
No, you won't.
That selfish mentality usually doesn't lead to any kind of fulfillment. But then once you are comfortable and happy, it's a catch-22, then things start to come naturally to you.
And I think people see that.
Yeah.
Like for you and I, we met through a good buddy of ours, Chris Newhart. Mm-hmm. And so Matt was doing Design Disruptors, this documentary, this project he was working on, and like last minute, Chris is like, he was DP, and he was like, hey, we need help on this shoot in New York that we're doing. So I jumped on it, and I was looking at like minimalism and all the stuff you did, and I was like super intimidated. I was like, oh man, Matt's the shit. Like I gotta have my A game. And it was funny that how you initially see somebody, no matter who it is, like your mind creates this perception of who this person is and how you have to act. Yeah. And it's like now you're in LA, and we were just down in Venice Beach at a coffee shop chilling, and it's like we've known each other forever, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't need to like act this way, or I don't need anything. You could just create a real relationship, and if that turns into something, it does. If it doesn't, it just only builds your network that you can. Yeah, I like the fact that I can be like, hey, I got this buddy Matt D'Avella. If you're looking for a director, if you're looking for something,
we so do this. Like you see somebody's avatar, and then you just jump to all these conclusions because you look somebody that I know who acts like this, so therefore this is his personality. Mm-hmm. And then you meet them in person, it usually immediately wipes it out. It reminds me a lot of online dating. I did a lot of Tindering, a lot of OkCupiding when I was in New York. And it was, you would just make all these assumptions about somebody, both based upon their profile photos, as well as the kind of witty banter back and forth. 9 times out of 10, you meet them in real life and you're like, this is not really the person who I thought it was going to be. Those were just really generous angles. Yeah. The witty banter turned out not to translate in person. So the expectations are tough.
Do you recycle your witty banter?
100%.
Attaboy.
I do. Yeah, man. Well, I read The Game. I'm sure. Did you read The Game?
What's that?
Neil Strauss. You don't know what the Game is?
I didn't read it.
Neil Strauss is amazing. So he's got a book called The Game. I was introduced to it in college.
Like the Tinder game or what?
No, this is mostly before online
like Kurt
dating.
Douglas, The Game.
This is like The Game, like players and pickup artists. So the whole community of pickup artists.
No, I didn't read this.
You never heard about this? Yeah, it's an amazing book. It's really good.
I was naturally born with that script in my head.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. That's not really fair because you kind of have a natural. Naturally, you're good with women.
I feel like both my grandfathers were studs. So
yeah, my grandpa was definitely a stud. Like I look at photos of him, I'm like, shit, his nickname used to be Hercules. And then I'm like,
that's pretty boss.
It's hard to live up to. Like he worked on the railroad.
That's when men were men.
Yeah, it's totally different now.
Coal mines, railroad. Everybody's in the military.
Yeah, my dad can fix, take a car apart, put it back together. He knows how to. He did the electric on our house, built our house from scratch, and man, I want to get into that, and I want to start kind of tracing my roots back.
We're both manual labor disappointments.
Yeah, we really are. And you know what? There's some good in that, I think. Mm-hmm. But being self-reliant is something that I aspire to achieve in those realms of my life. But anyway, The Game was this Neil Strauss. He wrote an amazing book, and he just co-authored a book with Kevin Hart. He works with a lot of really well-known celebrities and co-writes books with them, but he's got a couple books of his own. He's got one book called Emergency, where it's escaping LA in an apocalypse. And
really?
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
really, so he has
you were just talking about that.
Yeah. And then so he's a really interesting guy. So he wrote this book called The Game, and it was his basically telling his story of being this 40 to 50-year-old middle-aged man who wasn't good with women, never was good with women, hooked up with maybe a few girls, but never had many serious relationships, and then found out about this underground society of pickup artists and starts to learn all these
Are they out in New York?
No, I think, Neil Strauss now lives in L.A., and they were all mostly based in L.A., I think.
Oh.
So it was this kind of whole
underground. Of course they are.
Yeah, and it's this whole underground society, as they called it, but really it was them... men who weren't naturally good with women, learning how to talk to women. That's really the basics of it, and there can be some bad stigmatism around it, and there are certainly things, aspects of it that can go wrong, where like negging women or maybe kind of, I would say, misleading women would be a really bad direction that could head. But in the best case scenario of this, it's just helping guys that
It's like
get really nervous. Yeah, there's so many aspects to it.
What do you have
to
lose?
But it's like, here, just say this line, tell this story to them when you first meet them, and then you're going to open up, and then you can kind of transition into other conversation. But I forget how we got on there. But
I feel like that's kind of like what we were talking about in all aspects, not expecting something. Right? Like I have friends that are like that. They're like, oh man, like I need to get laid tonight. I need to do this. What do I do? I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't do that. Like, I'll just go and like, I'll just have a normal conversation. Like look at this person and talk to them like they're an actual human being. Yeah. And not just like a means to an end.
Yeah. There's a spectrum, because there's the guys that just get so nervous, like they wouldn't even know what to say. They would stutter. And it's like, all right, how do we help that guy get over that fear? And you got to just keep pushing yourself out there, keep doing it.
Being uncomfortable, man.
Yeah, being uncomfortable. Exactly. And that's the only way you're going to get better. I actually had a lot of social anxiety when I first started dating. Like during college, I didn't date that much. And then once I got into the real world, it was a different element of dating, and the online dating was starting to blow up, and I just didn't put myself out there. I didn't do anything. So I developed a social anxiety towards dating and getting out there and meeting girls to the point where it was the most terrifying thing in the world. And then I set up one date through OkCupid, and I was so fucking nervous on this date. Like the night before, it was the morning of, and I'm showering because we went out and got coffee. And I remember just like shaking in the shower. I was like, I can't do this. But just knowing that it's not a big deal. I'm just going to meet this person. Yeah. And if we don't hit it off, it's fine. And then I go on the date. I was really nervous. It was the first time I ever had an espresso. I got to show you how young I was.
I need to get some hair on my chest.
Then I'm just shaking on the date, even more nervous. It didn't really help calm my nerves. And that was it. And it wasn't the end of the world. And the next date was a little bit easier. The next date, a little bit easier. And then eventually I just got completely over it. And it wasn't a big deal anymore. I got nervous as anybody would on a first date. But it did help me get over it. We initially got into this in terms of you asking me, did I send stock messages to every girl? And I did.
Good man.
You have to in some ways when you're online dating. Because it's a numbers game.
Oh, this line works every time.
Yeah, exactly. And then, what are you supposed to be creative with every person? Yeah. And then 90% of the women don't respond.
To be creative all the time? What is this?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you do this for work?
Yeah. So, but anyway, online dating, I think, is the best parallel to really illustrate putting yourself out of your comfort zone, not having any expectations.
Yeah.
And just
it's weird. Remember when that was like, online dating? You're like, oh man, what is that? Like, that's so weird. It's so gross. And now it's like what everybody does.
It's totally normal, yeah.
But I have buddies, just to wrap this up, I have buddies that are afraid that like, oh, what if she says no or whatever? And I kind of look at it for auditions. Like I used to be so nervous to go on an audition, and I would do my lines, and I would do everything, and I'd walk out and I keep repeating it. Like, oh, I should have done it like this. I should have done it like this. And then it's like, just let it go. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Whatever happens, just like put it out there and let it go. And it's kind of like the same with like dating. It's like, you're going to get rejected. Who cares? That just wasn't meant to happen at that time. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's always like the things that ended up happening and things that clicked, that was the right thing. Mm-hmm. And you don't force it. You just like let it happen.
Yeah. You just have to be willing to look like an idiot.
Man, I get rejected all for acting, man. I get rejected all the time. Like if you book 1 in 10, you're a boss.
Yeah. What's the absolute worst case scenario of you being so courageous that you're willing to go after your dreams?
Yeah.
It's like that to me is like attempting that and failing and just being maybe back where you started, maybe a little bit in debt isn't as bad. That's you have to pursue that.
Did that have an influence on you coming out here?
I think I am,
because you were doing pretty successful in New York.
Yeah.
And this is a big jump. New York and LA are two totally different ball games.
The biggest hurdle for me was personal, and it was the leaving my family. Mm-hmm. I guess the being in Brooklyn is almost like being on another planet. Yeah. So it was kind of the same thing. It's like, what's a flight versus driving 3 hours through traffic to get home?
Exactly.
So that helped to kind of push me over. But I was doing well in New York, but most of my corporate shoots that I was doing were not in New York. Mm-hmm. I do a couple a year. You can fly in for that. Most of them were out of the city. And then on top of it, doing minimalism and design disruptors and starting to create original content and work on original projects and documentary series. That opened me up to be able to to work from anywhere.
Yeah.
And
It lets you see how big the world is too.
Sure.
So many stories to be told.
Yeah, and that's something that you're really passionate about is traveling. And I went on my first airplane when I was, I think, 20 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Where'd you go? Florida?
I did a shoot in Colorado and then Las Vegas.
That's cool.
I did Rock the Bells behind the scenes footage for this Rock the Bells concert, and I ended up sharing a hotel room with Mos Def.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, he had like the suite, and then I had like I was in the closet next door.
How'd that happen?
This guy that I had worked with was really good friends with him, and he's the one that brought me along for this shoot. He was an early mentor of mine, and then he was friends with Mos Def, so then we ended up going to Denny's together. And
Yeah, of course, because that's where Mos Def hangs out.
Yeah, exactly. It was a wild experience and really a learning experience for me. First time flying. I didn't go on another... I never went on a personal trip until Costa Rica when like 4 years ago. And then
Beautiful
since then,
down there.
it's amazing. And since then, I'm like, I want to start traveling more. When did you the first time you left the country?
First time I went to Niagara Falls when I was like 16.
It doesn't count.
Yeah, I know.
You can
Because we
see
stayed
it
on the
from
New York
here.
side. I think.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
I would like
You
touch the
saw
water.
it.
I'm like, international water. No, the first time I went, my ex-girlfriend was Japanese. So on New Year's Day, 2007, I think, I was 20. 2006, I don't know, 2006 maybe. New Year's Day, I flew to Japan. Spent like 3 weeks out there.
Wow.
And that was mind-blowing. And it's funny because I've been doing a lot of traveling in the last year, and a lot of what I'm trying to get out of it stems from that trip because I didn't appreciate it. Like they paid for me to fly like first class, and it was like I got super spoiled. And when I got there, it was like they were celebrating New Year's. And her grandmother made this like huge traditional like spread of all these amazing foods, and everything was fresh. And I was like, sushi.
No
Philly
way.
guys. I'm like, whatever.
Oh,
and I didn't eat it, and I didn't take advantage of it. And now I'm like, oh my God, like her dad. Now when I look back, her dad was like super high up. So like everything we were doing was like stuff that people there will never even be able to do. And I took it all for granted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I really screwed that trip up.
You got to eat the
especially
sea
like
urchin.
cultural wise.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get stuff, so I was like real closed off. Like I was like, oh well, yeah, they're, whatever. Like they worship in temples up in mountains. That's weird.
Yeah.
And I was such an idiot. I didn't sit back and go, wow, look at the beauty of this. What's the history? Like, why are they doing what they're doing?
I think that's part of traveling, though.
Absolutely.
Is in the beginning, for some people it may not click, and you may not really be able to get to fully experience it. And not every trip is created equal. It depends how old you are when you go, but I think the more and more you do it, the more comfortable you get at it, and the more you allow yourself to just relax and
Absolutely.
enjoy the experience and learn from other cultures.
Yeah. And I think I was just in Iceland, which is incredible if you haven't been there. But it was weird because like when I think of Iceland, I don't really know what that thing. You think ice, although Mighty
land.
Ducks, they said, Iceland's
everybody
green and
knows.
Greenland's white.
Yeah. That's like literally how I know geography.
Thanks,
Mighty
Emilio
Ducks.
Estevez. But with that, like went to Iceland and it was like a whole other world. It was green and it was flowers and it was like 70 degrees and black sand beaches and icebergs there and glaciers on top of mountains and wild horses and sheep and the best fresh food. And it's funny because when you travel, it's like, how do I explain it? It's like my perception of Iceland was this little landmass on a map, right? But now my story of my life gets bigger because now I can talk about Iceland and it's like my whole perception. It's like, now it's like this whole world that like I can't wait to get back to, and you have your perception. Like I was also just in the Philippines and like I thought of the Philippines as just these beautiful beaches and like hot girls and this is what it was. But when you get there, you see their people and societies that are going through the same things like that we are. It's kind of like, I guess, how people see America, like everything's perfect here. But here we're like, oh, there's so much wrong. And like, it's the downfall of our country.
Yeah.
It's just like your perception of, you base everything off of what you know.
So you've been to actually 43, or is it 43 of the 50 states or 47?
I've been to all of them.
You've been to all of them.
I haven't been in the Pacific Northwest until a couple of weeks ago. I was at Mount Rainier. And I love Seattle. Mount Rainier,
Beautiful.
It's gorgeous. I haven't been to like Montana, Idaho, like those upper states there, and Alaska and Hawaii. I haven't been to yet.
Was that systematic? Were you trying to travel to every state?
No.
Happened to?
Well, I think with this country, we don't appreciate. I think you learn to appreciate where you're from once you travel and you see like the pros and cons of every different country. And it's like you start realizing, oh, like I want to live in the Philippines. It'd be so awesome to live in Australia. But then you get there and you realize, you know, there's the same highs and lows as there are here, and you appreciate things that we have here compared to there. Mm-hmm. But even like what you said, our states, it's almost like if we were Europe, we would be so many different countries. I literally just went. I've done the whole East Coast thing, you know, up and down, just because we're from the East Coast. But I did a traveling play, so I saw a lot of the South with that. But I drove back and forth across the country 3 times last year. When I moved out here, I drove across, totaled my car, flew home, drove across again with my dad and my brothers. We did a road trip, but we took a different. You know, you took a different route. And then my brother moved to San Francisco, so then him and I took a different route as well. So just by default, we were just driving through everything. And then the more and more you start seeing stuff, it's like, well, now I want to see, you know, what Chicago's like. I want to see what Montana's like. I want to see what, you know, New Orleans is like. And you appreciate the big cities, but I think Utah might be my favorite state that I've seen just because it's so vast. The deserts and just all the colors in the sky, and it's just the landform masses, and you're just like, wow, it's like a whole other world.
Yeah, we filmed part of the minimalism in Salt Lake City in the Salt Flats.
Yeah,
which was one of the.
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning, and it's definitely worth checking out. But we were driving out there and driving for maybe 2, 3, 4 hours, and we're like, should we just turn around, because we have a schedule and we have stuff that we need to do. We had an interview going on later that day, and we're like, I don't even know if we're going to be able to get to it. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And eventually it's just like in this wide expanse of white salt for fields for as far as you can see, and ended up being I think one of the most beautiful scenes of the film, where Josh reads and tells the story of his mother dying and his marriage ending and how he discovered minimalism. And but you had to just keep digging through it to be able to find that scenery. But that's part of traveling too, is just that sometimes it actually doesn't work out. Sometimes you're hoping to, you know, see a place that's really beautiful, and then ends up being foggy, and then the day is, you know, quote unquote ruined. But you have to, like you said, the highs and highs, right? And the lows. Yeah.
And it helps us develop as storytellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, because we get out there and we put ourselves out there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, you know, even if something doesn't work out the way that you want it to, it's still an experience that you have. And then when you look back on it, like me for Japan, I didn't take advantage of it, but it made me a better traveler, because now I know what not to do.
Right. I wanted to do the cross country thing.
Have you done it yet?
No, and I wanted to do it moving over here to LA, but then our timeline just shifted so much that Natalie had to get her visa, and there was only a 2-week window, so we just had to fly, and we shipped everything. We had a company ship it over. But you did the drive over here.
Yeah, I drove.
And you didn't have a apartment ready, nothing. You just took the trip.
No, yeah, it was funny. It was last year. I was going through like some personal stuff, and I had to get out of Philly. And literally in a 2 days time, I sold my car. I got a new car that was a little bit more reliable. I was living with my ex at the time, and it was like one of those weird situations where you break up, but you're still in a lease together.
Oh man!
And it was brutal. So one day I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I've always wanted to go to LA, and I always get into relationships and I end up staying, and I stay comfortable. Like, oh, I got this work in Philly. Like, oh, I got this. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what am I doing, man? Like, I always said I wasn't going to be that guy that grows up and like, oh, I should have done this. And I was like, I should have been in LA years ago. So I literally just threw some suits in a car, and I like just left everything in my apartment. My buddy Mike and we just got in. I called him at like 11 at night and said, what are you doing the next like week and a half? And he's like, I don't know. What do you got in my mind? And I'm like, grab a duffel bag full of shit. We're driving out west. I'll fly you back. And that's what we did. We just got in a car and we just started driving. Blasted through Colorado, and we're going through the Rockies. And Mike's like, hey, do you have a place to stay? And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have a game plan. I don't want to sleep on somebody's couch. I don't want to do that. So we got on Craigslist, and I was like, hey, this is my budget. Look, find something. And he found this bachelor pad in Marina Del Rey. And if you don't know Marina Del Rey, it's just south of Venice. It goes Marina Del Rey, Venice, Santa Monica. and I needed to be by the beach. So I'm like, oh man, perfect. So we get out here. The first thing we do, we drive there. We pull up into the marina, and this guy meets us, and I'm looking at all these amazing apartments. I'm like, oh man, this is like, I'm gonna be balling. Like, I showed her. I moved out to LA. I'm in a sick place, right? So like I get there, and the guy, he starts walking down the dock towards like these boats. I'm like, oh, I guess he's got to get the key off a boat or whatever. Maybe, man, maybe I got a dock too. This is sick. So he gets on a boat, and he's like, well, here she is. And I'm like, here's what? And he goes, this is the bachelor pad. And I looked up, and it was like this 27-foot power boat. And in my mind, I'm like, fuck yes. Like, 'cause I tried to do it when I was working on power. I wanted to live in the naval yard on a boat. And some guy's like, what are you, retarded? This shit like freezes over. Like, you're going to die in this boat. Yeah. So I opted for a car. So I signed a lease, and some things happened. And it was like 4th of July weekend. I was flying a director in from this film that I was working on. And I'm all amped up, ready to go to like have these guys stay on this boat. And the guy that owned the boat's like, hey, he comes over and he's like, you got to get off the boat. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I just sold it. You got to be out in an hour. And I'm like, I got people flying out here and a possible investor. Like, they were going to stay on the boat. This is supposed to be like a whole thing.
Yeah.
And luckily, I was looking at this other boat. I was looking at the sailboat to live on this, to actually buy the sailboat, because I did a couple Amazon commercials that paid out. And I just impulse buy, called the guy up. I'm like, hey, I got cash. I want to buy this boat. So I go and take a look at this boat, and I don't know anything about sailing. I don't know anything about anything. God. I don't know shit.
Yeah.
And I get on this boat, and he's like, hey, you want to take it out? You want to do whatever? And I kind of like lifted up the cushions a little bit. I like felt the sail. I like knocked on the hull, and I'm like, no, she's good. She's good. And he's like, I want this much. And I'm like, no, I got this much cash. Take it or leave it. And I totaled my car like the day before, and I got...
How many times have you totaled your car?
It's a long story. But I got paid out. And so I used that money to help get a boat.
Wow.
Along with the commercial stuff. So now I live on this boat. I live on this awesome sailboat. And you know what? It was in those moments where like I totaled my car. Like I had to get kicked off the boat. And it was like all this stuff where I'm like, fuck. Like the whole world is against me. And literally a week and a half later... it was the perfect scenario. Like if I would have just like trusted,
isn't that
you just trust what's going to happen and stop thinking that the world is against you and working for you.
Yeah.
And how can I make the best of a situation, which I'm not the best at.
Well, life continues to be like that. There's always highs and lows.
In everything you do.
And you keep... you have good times, you have bad times, and then when you have good times, you're like, everything's working out, this is great, I should always feel this way. And then when things are really shitty and going bad, you're like, why is this happening to me?
Man.
But it's
my
like,
life sucks.
It's like we can't step back for a minute and look at the big picture. And I think sometimes that's what meditation can help do,
and the gratitude, all that.
And gratitude is just to take a step back and see how your life is progressing and how some days are good, some days are bad. But in the grand scheme of things, if you keep level-headed and you're more self-aware, you can get
and that's not some weird like hippie shit. Like I used to be like, oh, yoga, meditation, but it's just the fact that you see like how blessed we are and how good that we have things, because all like our society is built, especially with social media, it's all me. You know what I mean? And people look at somebody else's Instagram feed and be like, oh, they get depressed. Like that's a real thing. People get depressed because my life isn't as cool. Yeah. But all we're doing is just filtering things that we want the world to see.
How do we make like I guess like important content? Because we talk about content, but it's really we're not just trying to make shit. We're not just trying to throw stuff out there against the wall and just get a bunch of attention, the me mentality. How do we
is kind of what you get stuck into. Like when I first started, I'm not gonna lie, like acting seemed like awesome. Like, oh man, move to LA and I'll be famous, blah blah blah. It's all the wrong reasons that we're doing stuff. But honestly, like seeing stuff you do, seeing stuff Newhart does. I love Chris Burkhardt. If you guys don't follow him on social media, he's an incredible photographer and videographer. He actually just did a doc. What's it called, Hope? Under the Northern Lights, where he legit goes to Northern Lights in Iceland and just surfs.
Wait, you were telling me about this.
And it's all dark because like when we were there, it was summer and it's 24 hours of light. But the inverse is during winter, it's 24 hours of darkness. Wow. These guys are just like surfing under like the Northern Lights. What's that?
Under the Arctic sky.
Under the Arctic sky. Yeah. And it's just like, it was beautiful. And like, you hear him talk, like kind of like you did your tour with minimalism, and you're traveling all over and you're talking, and it's like you get to talk about what you created and seeing the impact that you've had on people. But it was something that obviously meant something to you. And it's like, we're just not making shit. Because I've honestly pulled back a lot on my acting stuff to focus more on doc, more on meaningful content, which is originally what I got into it. But then you get so caught up in this world of like, you think you just got to survive, and you kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And you lose sight of like who you are and what you stand for.
It's difficult when we're all tapped into it. We're all on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And from time to time, no matter who you follow, some of these stories end up coming through, and you end up seeing people who get a lot of attention for having really shitty content or something that's just like meant to, get a quick laugh or is shock worthy. There's you see them getting that kind of engagement and getting that kind of attention, and there's a part of you that's like, maybe I should just like do some shit like that.
Yeah.
Like maybe if I just did that, then I get a lot of attention, then I can start making meaningful stuff. But I think it needs to, you always have to put meaningful in front of content.
Yeah.
And
I'm bad with that. Like, it's so easy to get distracted. Like, I've been doing social media stuff, but then I've been like traveling, but then I'm like, oh man, I could get into TV, and I've been trying to develop some like pilots for a buddy of mine, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed, but you spread yourself so thin that you can't deliver on promises you made, and you don't put, your best effort in one particular thing. And that's something that I struggle with, that I've been trying to work on a lot.
You have to also let yourself make some mistakes. Let yourself.
You have to.
Yeah, and like, dude, sometimes I'll make some stuff that's shitty, that's not that meaningful, but it was fun. It was like, cool, why not? Life is a balance. So when you're exercising and working out all the time, you might travel and have a week where you fall out of your workout routine. Yeah. That's the same thing with making great stuff. Yeah. Is that sometimes you'll fall out of it and you'll make shitty stuff. Yeah,
but I think that's also like a discipline. Like, my big thing is when I travel, I have a lot of buddies that travel and they do like sales or whatever, and their mind's not right, or their health is kind of off, and you got to create a balance. Like, I want to go out and eat a steak dinner every night if a client's treating you, but sometimes you have to step back and be like, like, where's my discipline? Where's my self-control? With a lot of things. And that's like that's sex, that's drinking, that's anything. Where's your self-control? And like, where do you find a balance? Because, even if you're traveling and you can't work out, you can go an early morning run somewhere. You could just do push-ups. You could do whatever. Just watch what you eat. Don't eat a lot of bullshit. Don't drink every night.
Do you know Jocko Willink?
Oh yeah. He's awesome.
Yeah. He's amazing. So that reminded me, he's got this, I think he's actually coming out with a new book that's discipline equals freedom. And it's just this whole idea.
I'm Jocko. You're listening to Jocko.
Yeah.
He's a badass.
He's
good. Like your grandfather. It reminds me of Hercules.
Yeah, exactly. I just went through and I listened to all, like, he has a podcast. His first ever podcast that he done was with Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And then listened to that. Then he did one with Joe Rogan and also with Sam Harris. And all three I highly recommend. It's probably about 7 or 8 hours worth of interviews there. But he's super inspirational guy. And I was joking with Natalie because I wake up pretty early. He's got this philosophy, discipline equals freedom, where you have to have the discipline. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but if you have the discipline to stick to a schedule, to wake up early, it's going to give you more freedom, because then you have the freedom to, if you work out in the morning and you get all the work done you need to by 11, 12 p.m., then you have the freedom to do what you want.
Yeah,
afterwards.
And you feel productive early in the morning.
So he's got this thing where he's like, I got to wake up before the enemy. I wake up at 4:30.
That's pretty good.
He's like, I think about the enemy. Everything's
the enemy.
Yeah, with an AK-47 in one hand and a grenade in the other.
I just heard that.
So then I told Natalie, I was like, I gotta wake up before the enemy, because she's like, why are you waking up at 5:30? I was like, I gotta wake up before the enemy.
She's like, am I the enemy?
She said that. Yeah. There was like a brief pause. She was like, wait a minute, am I the enemy? And then I have this collage in my closet where it's just like Natalie, enemy. But no, it's I think that's a great mentality. He talks also about extreme ownership. Yeah. Just own up. Take responsibility for everything. Great leaders take responsibility. They don't push blame onto people, especially if they're below them.
It's easy to make excuses nowadays.
It's so easy. Oh my God, that's all people do, I think, is just make excuses. I find myself doing that. I do it too. And then you just have to catch yourself and realize that's the thing that's so hard, is that we make a lot of excuses and we have a lot of self-limiting beliefs.
Oh, absolutely.
About, well, I can't do this because I'm this old.
When did that happen? I feel like it's like in the last like couple generations that we've been doing it. Because I feel like my dad was a badass. My grandfather was a badass. Like our ancestors totally uprooted everything that they had and moved to America and did all this stuff. And like we moved to LA, and it's like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Right, moved to LA. It's like, what?
I think I tend to agree with you, but I think that's probably like we have a bias towards being nostalgic about past generations, about how great they are. So that might be an element in that. Yeah. And I'm sure that they had their doubts as well. But you have to, I think, what do you do when you have self-doubt or self-limiting beliefs?
Now, I get it a lot because not just our industry, but I think about like my brother. Today's his birthday. Happy birthday, Andrew.
Happy birthday, Andrew.
He just had twins last week. Wow. And he has 4 kids now. He's just turned 31. He has 4 kids. Just redid his beautiful house. And I look and I'm like, man, like he has a family, he has kids, he has a home, and we're like the same age. And it's like kind of like, what do I have to show for it? You know, and then I look at my dad, and my dad did the same thing, his own company. Like my brother's right on par with my dad, and my dad's like my hero, my role model, Frank Nadu. And I'm like, where do I measure up with that? But I feel like in our generation, we're trying to measure up like, how do I compare to this person, this person, this person, instead of going, you know what? This is my journey. Like, you're not living life unless you follow your own path. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can be inspired by others, but ultimately you're the one that's writing it. You know, so I think for me, it's like, instead of looking at something like I'm failing at something, it's like, well, I learned from it, you know, and I did this and I did that. And it kind of comes back to like doing that stand-in work. At first it was like bullshit, and I like didn't want to admit I was standing. Like I did stunts a couple times, but I would always just be like, oh, I just do stunts for them. Mm-hmm. But then I learned so much, and something that felt kind of degrading at first, and like, oh my God, what am I doing? Now it's like, man, if I didn't take that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met the people I did. I wouldn't have known New York. I wouldn't, you know what I mean? And I think I wouldn't even be here. Mm-hmm. No, I wouldn't even be sitting here if all that stuff didn't work. So when I have self-doubt, I just sit back and I think about, what am I good at? There's like the SWOT analysis that you can do. You can look that up, and it kind of measures your strengths and weaknesses. And a lot of times I have self-doubt. I can't do this, or this. And I think, well, what am I good at? And then what have I done recently that shows that? And then what can I do in the future that keeps pushing my strengths, but also how can I work on my weaknesses? Mm-hmm. And I think when it's just being aware of it, like you were saying before, like we do things, but then we catch ourselves. It's almost like meditation. Like I sit and meditate for 10 minutes. I'm thinking about everything I have to do. But like Tim Ferriss says, sometimes you get that 1 minute that you just don't think of anything. And like that's success, because you catch mm-hmm. yourself thinking about whatever. And I think it's just being aware of what you're doing.
I think awareness and self-awareness is one of the most important things, at least that you can do socially. Yeah. Because if you can be aware that if you're being a dick or if you're coming across as rude, then you can train yourself to pull back on it and to be a little bit nicer to people. But if you're not aware of the thoughts that you're having and how you're treating other people, and how other people are treating you, then you're never going to be able to correct that.
That's huge. And that goes for anything, even like on set. Like if you're like, for you, if you're, you know, I feel like a lot when you pick your crew, does a lot of it have to do with like their skill, or does also like their personality play into it? Like how am I going to see myself working with this guy for several weeks or several months?
Well, you think about how you first meet crew, and it's usually from a shoot, from a previous project that you worked on, or you get a recommendation from somebody. And the first thing that stands out is not their work, because you haven't seen their work yet. Mm-hmm. The first thing that stands out is their personality and how responsive they are, if they show up early. There's so many other things that you see that are more reflective of their personality and who they are as a human than it is about the work that they've done in the past. And I think that assessing their personality and how hard they work is more of a reflection about what they're going to do in the future than it is than what they've done in the past. So I think you're completely right. That's the mentality that I have is I want to work with people that are show up early, that are hardworking, and then you can genuinely have a good time with them, because these are your coworkers. Even if it's for a short period of time, these are the people you're going to be spending a lot of time with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the... Fixer was a pretty big short film that you did, that you and Chris worked on together. It was pretty great. What would you rank that up as one of your favorite projects?
Yeah, that was awesome. It sucked because I wanted to act in it, but I got in a car accident and I broke my legs and my arms, and it was all this stuff. So
Wait, was this a separate one?
R.I.P. Yeah, R.I.P. car that I was living in New York.
Remind me never to be in a car with you.
Yeah, no, I'm good now.
Are you
I'm
now?
good now. Yeah, it's been
it?
1 year since I've been in an accident.
Wow. You live on a boat, so.
Yeah, good God. Like, I can't believe that I actually have insurance for that. I haven't hit any. Well, I lie. We're not going to go there.
You're going to get your boat
But let's
license.
just say I navigate the marina fairly well. But with the fixer was awesome because like my legs are broken. I just got out of the hospital. I had all this stuff going on, but we already committed to this project. So it was kind of like a testament for me. Like, it was easy to sit back and be like, oh shit, like I'm just gonna sit here and just worry about stuff. But I wasn't like that. I was so excited about this project, and I just wanted to get out there and make this. So Chris and I teamed up. Our DP, Matt Mahoney, he's incredible.
Yeah, he's phenomenal, man.
Yeah, Mahoney.
I follow him on Instagram. I don't know how I got in touch with him, but he's a super talented dude.
Yeah, so it was us three, and then Sean Costello was a guy I used to do a lot of production stuff with, and he actually acted in it. But we got together and we put this short. It was the Road Mike Film Fest.
Yeah.
And Newhart brought it up. I think him and Mahoney brought it up. And we literally, in like 4 days, we set up this whole shoot. We shot this short. We pulled these amazing shots together and this amazing crew. And we ended up getting finalists, like top 3 in every major category in this film festival. And we didn't end up winning any, but we got runner-up, I think, in like 5 categories. But it was awesome because you see some of these guys work, and it's incredible. But they did a behind-the-scenes thing, and it's like months that they worked on this. And this was a story that meant so much. We literally wrote the script, shot, edited, did everything in 4 days.
I love that.
And it was incredible because it was like everybody had to be on their A game. Yeah. You know, it's like you didn't have time to blame somebody else for something or go, oh, this isn't working. We all just kind of stepped into everybody else's shoes and just saw what could happen. And instead of being this chaos, it was this beautiful wheel that never came off the track.
I think it's a good example of constraints, and every project has constraints, whether it's budget or timing or whatever. Yeah. But that's like a really extreme constraint where you have 4 days to create a project from scratch.
Yeah.
And how do you pull it off?
And it was throwing yourself into something. I think we think too much. Like producing, I didn't know what the hell producing is, and I didn't know really what to do, but it's like, oh, this has to get done. It's like common sense on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Like something has to be done. How do I problem solve this? Mm-hmm. And do I know someone who can help? And can I do this? And then how do I help somebody else? I think a big thing in just being a human being is, where can you lend your skills or talents in places that might necessarily not be what you're assigned to? And I think that's how you learn a lot of things. It's like, oh, you're a DP, but also, now you're a gaffer and you're a grip. And you know what? And now you're sitting with the director and be like, hey, maybe this should be changed. And it's like, you start learning so much.
And that's what makes you valuable. It's going to be more and more important as we progress and as technology becomes more accessible to everybody. And even today, we think it's like almost as if we've arrived and now anybody can do anything. But I think it's getting easier and easier. And eventually iPhones are probably going to be able to shoot as good as these cameras that we have right here. Everybody's going to have access to it, but you have to be able to really diversify how good you are at all of these different tools to bring them together.
But even going back to content creating, like if you have an iPhone, guys, if you're not in this world, just go shoot something. Like if you have an iPhone, because you're learning to be your own DP, your own director, you're editing it yourself, and you probably have your buddies in there, or you jump in and set it on a tripod, or put it up against a beer bottle, and you go and do your thing. But you're learning how to do everything. Mm-hmm. And even though you think it's some amateur thing, like in the real world, multiple people are getting paid to do each one of those roles. Yeah. And if you can do all that, I mean, just it's so much more valuable.
Do you listen to podcasts to get inspired, or do you listen to it before you need the inspiration just to keep you going? Like, when do they come into play for you?
So I was kind of in the podcast game late, but with that, like Tim Ferriss had like 300-400 episodes that I could sit and listen to. You know what I mean? Like Brett McKay had all these episodes I can listen to. Jocko, all these episodes I can sit and listen to. You get to walk into Tim Ferriss's world or Joe Rogan's world, and it's like Joe Rogan sitting down talking one-on-one with a buddy, like we're doing right now. Yeah, we're just having a normal conversation, and this is like conversations that we would just have any day. Yeah, but now it's like I can pull inspiration from these guys because I'm like, wow, I'm a lot like them. They have insecurities, and it's like, what do they do to make themselves better? What are their morning rituals? Maybe it works for me, maybe it doesn't. But I got into a lot of like meditation and a lot of journaling. And I love writing, but for me as a writer, the worst thing to do is to write. Like I get so distracted with all this other stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll write then, but I should do this, this, this. And I don't know why, but it's something I love, and it's so hard for me to do. But once I start writing, then I'm gold.
I think that's what's great about podcasts and long form conversation is that we've gotten a little bit desensitized to the 1 minute video clip, the 2 minute sound bite.
Absolutely.
And it's we want to feel like we're hearing a real conversation. And how do you actually get to understand somebody? The only way to do it is to talk to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things about podcasting.
And real quick, I remember seeing Tim Ferriss on like 2 hours and 20 minutes for a podcast. And the next thing I knew, it seemed like 5 minutes. I'm 4 podcasts later.
Yeah.
You know when it goes by so quick, and it's just like,
I've been devouring it. I've been getting heavily into podcasts and audiobooks. And it flies by. And I feel like you learn so much. And it's never
sitting in traffic is the best time to listen to it in LA. I do it all the time.
Yeah, and it's never, for me, it's like I really want to continually learn new things, and I do that with a lot of these podcasts, whether it's you're learning about somebody's story or you're actually learning about the future of AI and technology, and all this stuff is really fascinating. And like I'm not a very good sponge when it comes to knowledge. I don't retain a lot, but it's the continued pursuit of learning and always being open to new ideas and being open to question previous beliefs and previous ideas. I think is one of the most important things, because then
it's one of the great things about mankind too.
Yeah,
because since the very beginning, that's all we've been doing, trying to learn more and trying to just build on what's been given to us and leave something a little bit better.
Right, and that's why we're here, right? Is because of since we started writing down, and then you have these people who take leaps forward for us, but we're continuing along that journey every day.
It's like the people that influence the world the most are the outcasts, the freaks, the people that are like do the abnormal things. I mean, even if you get killed in the midst of it, it's like those are the people that we look back and we're like, wow, they changed history.
Yeah,
they weren't afraid to be uncomfortable.
All right, you ready for quick questions?
Let's do it.
All right, quick questions, not quick answers unless you want to answer them quick. That's really up to you. But it is the one and only segment of the Ground Up Show where I get to ask you questions and then you answer them. It's kind of like the entire podcast, but in more condensed form. So
you just really hyped it up.
Yeah, I did. For question number 1, what's the simplest advice that's hard to follow?
Man, my own advice: get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that's something that I've been really trying to push. It's like anything, whether you're eating a new type of food or whether it's like a new workout or going up to a hot girl and being like, oh man, I'm gonna go make this move. It's like, if you don't take that initial step and if you don't take that first leap, you'll never do it, and you'll spend the rest of your life thinking I should have.
How do you deal with criticism?
I notice that sometimes I'm dismissive with it, but I'm always listening to it. Like it depends on when I get it. Like if I'm in the middle of something and you're giving me criticism, like while we're working, I guess it's kind of like everybody. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I'm still like taking it in. But I've been getting better at it. I appreciate criticism, especially on the acting front. Like auditioning, I never know. You go in for an audition, I don't know why I didn't book it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Is it my looks? Am I a shitty actor? Like what is it? So when I can get feedback, I always appreciate that. And I think the thing is, you got to learn, like somebody wouldn't tell you something if it wasn't something that needed to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's hard. Like when you got to tell somebody, hey, like you need to work on this, or this is something I noticed. I mean, that takes a lot from that person as well to let you know that. So I think just trying to learn from that and being aware of maybe it's something I might have to change.
What one skill has helped you the most in your life?
I think my ability to communicate and being willing to just accept people who they are.
Let's say somebody's stuck. What one thing can they do today to go on a path of becoming unstuck?
Don't look at yesterday. I mean, yesterday already happened. And if you think about the past, only reason the past exists because we're remembering it. It's in our memory or we write it down. Besides that, we don't know. And we think so much about the future, like, oh, what's going to happen? Just be in the moment and realize that everything that you're doing right now is going to affect the outcome of the next moment.
Name one thing that people should read before they go to bed tonight?
Ooh, I've been...
Or listen to. How about read or listen to? Because we can
Okay.
go audio, we can go...
So I've been... what is it called? I forget. Man. Shit, what did I just finish reading? I've been really reading a lot of...
I know what you read.
Which one?
Steal Like an Artist? Was that it?
Yeah.
I saw you reading that at
so
the
we can do
coffee
that.
shop.
I've been reading Steal Like an Artist, and that's just something that shows you that there's a whole bunch of different like little things in there, but it just shows you that every single person that's creative in history has copied off of somebody else or used them as inspiration. Mm-hmm. And it's like we're never going to come up with new original ideas. It's instead of thinking, oh man, I can't do this and that well is tapped dry, think how can I put my own personal touch into something, and then let others be inspired and keep creating.
If people want to connect with you online, where would you send them?
So Instagram at Matthew Nadu, MatthewNadu. Also MatthewNadu.com. You can also take a look there. And my phone number is hit me up on that.
Cool. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Matt, absolute pleasure, brother.
Right.
Thank you.